Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This review has finally come. Sorry for being not being around on YouTube with making the reviews, but I've been busy, so it's finally come. I'm gonna do the review on Black Christmas, the 1974 film, not the 2006 remake. You can start the movie, but I may do a short review on it, a quick and effective one. See how long it takes, but hope you enjoy this. As I heard, based on the horror film Family Tree I saw some time ago, that if Halloween was the mother of all slasher flicks, then this, Black Christmas, is the father of all slasher flicks. Because Black Christmas came out in 1974, a mere 4 years before Halloween. So this is like the proto-Halloween, and it is a very psychologically effective film, very scary as Halloween. I think this acted as the basis for Halloween. You could definitely tell by the striking similarities such as the killer's point of view, the unseen killer in the shadows, and etc. But this film is regarded as being one of the first slasher films, and it set the layer for films such as Halloween, which also in turn set the layout for copycat slasher films. However, director Bob Clark considered it to be more of a psychological horror film than a slasher film. Yeah, there are bits of blood here and there, maybe some graphicness, but it's not as bloody as many of the other horror movies such as Friday the 13th or A Nightmare on Elm Street or Scream. Even Halloween didn't have any graphic gore in it, just bits of blood here and there. And I think that's cool that you can make a horror movie without showing any graphic violence. If these two movies were released today, they might as well be PG-13. Never know. So to say on the title, it was originally in the original script. It was titled "Stop Me," and it was written part typewritten and part handwriting. And it was Bob Clark's idea to change it to Black Christmas because his reason is that he liked the irony of something dark occurring during such a festive holiday, and I think it works very well. And upon its various releases, the film had went through several titles. For its U.S. theatrical release, courtesy of Warner Brothers, the film was retitled to Silent Night, Evil Night. The reason for the change was because Warner Brothers feared the title Black Christmas might cause the film to be mistaken for a blaxploitation flick. However, the film didn't do well under the new title, and it was changed back to the original title, under which it was a success. Also, when it was being broadcasted on TV by NBC, it was given another title, which was Stranger in the House. And a fun trivia note, on the night Stranger in the House was broadcasting on Prime TV, dozens of residents called the NBC company and pleaded them to pull the movie off the air, claiming that it was too scary. That'll prove it. If your audience is scared by your movie, then you know that you made a successful scary movie. So to say, its screenwriter is Roy Moore, and even though he wrote the script and he titled it "Stop Me," even though we may never find out what exactly became the basis for this movie, but we have two massive rumors. It is believed that screenwriter Roy Moore was inspired by an article about an actual series of murders that occurred in Montreal, Quebec, in Canada, around Christmas time. Even though there are some beliefs, some saying that there weren't any murders in Montreal. But the other rumor is that he was actually inspired by the urban legend The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs, which involved a babysitter in a house getting strange phone calls from someone, not knowing that the person calling is inside the house upstairs, which is scary. Or he was inspired by both. Either way, the script was born. And according to Bob Clark, the script featured murder scenes that were more graphic. Clark, however, felt that it would be more effective if the murders were toned down and made more subtle on screen. Even Roy Moore liked the idea. Clark claims that he rewrote half of Roy's script, adding some humor into the film. Roy was against the idea of never seeing the killer. However, when he saw the finished film, he was very pleased with it. And yeah, there's Olivia Hussey, who was in the 1968 movie Romeo and Juliet and the 1990 movie Psycho 4: The Beginning, and Margot Kidder before she did Superman and The Amityville Horror. She is really hilarious in this movie. She makes the humorous part of the movie based on her character. She's funny. And as for the other woman who plays Bill, that's Andrea Martin. She would later go on to star in the 2006 remake of Black Christmas, where she played the house mother, Mrs. Mack. So, it's like poetry rhyming. Except the fact that no one likes the remake, even I. But if it weren't for the remake, then I probably wouldn't have known about this movie and owned it and love it. So, thanks, remake. You showed me a good movie. And where they get the phone calls from the moaner, they're obscene, the calls from the guy, but very scary, and it also adds explanation to who the killer is, which is very scary based on the creator's creativity. And it'll be explained later, but the killer's name is Billy, and we never know exactly who he is or why he's doing this. We never even see his face, but it makes it much more scarier when you see it that way. If the killer is much more mysterious, and his identity is never revealed at the end. Never. But I think it's much more scarier that way when you do that. And the phone calls does add a bit of backstory about Billy, even though they're a bit puzzling. But if you figure it out, it is a very psychologically chilling backstory. But not knowing much about them is what makes them more frightening to the audience. Only seeing his eye or his hands. Almost like what Dario Argento did in his movies. But this threat he makes to Barb, "I'm going to kill you," is very scary, and that's a scary threat. It scared her, also based on the look on her face. And the way he said it in a normal voice is also frightening. I also love the spinning phone with the spinner numbers on it. I have one of those. They're great. It's probably much better than the cell phones in my mind. The house looks very nice, also while being eerie whenever it's at night, with the killer lurking about, almost like the house in Halloween and the house in When a Stranger Calls, both the 79 original and 2006 remake. I like the remake because it expanded the first 22 minutes of the original into feature length. And it reminded me of these old movies. And what makes the killer much more scarier is the fact that he basically lures his victims to their dooms. He causes a distraction like imitating a cat's meow to lure his victim closer, and he kills them. I think that's much scarier if your killer lures you to your doom. And the part here where he kills the first sorority girl by asphyxiating her with plastic sheetings was never seen before, I think. But it's so scary. Instead of a knife, it's a plastic sheeting. It just makes it that much scary and effective and chilling especially when it's the first kill. And it's also basically, you know he's in there, but it makes it scarier as to, is he gonna jump out? When is he gonna jump out? And then he does. And that makes the audience jump. Also, a little hint dropping. We've seen the cat, I think, downstairs, but then when we see him in Claire's room, we see him in Claire's room, the cat, but the door's closed. How'd he get in? Then it reveals it. Keep in mind that this is the first horror movie, but it's filled with the cliches we've seen in the modern typical horror movies. But if you put aside all those movies out of your memory and watch this only, without any knowledge of the other movies you've seen, it makes it much more scarier, and even Halloween as well. Then it becomes a lot more better when it happens, and like such as the cops being dumb. Yeah, they are a bit worthless in this movie, and they played comedically, these cops, but this was the first horror movie to have that idea, and Halloween did it as well. And other movies where either the cops either don't believe the person's story or just come up late. But it works in this movie if you just put aside all the other horror movies you've seen before this, like Scream and Friday the 13th. It helps that way. And the whole idea of the killer just hiding in the sorority house in the attic is very chilling, because he's surrounded by these potential victims. He could kill them at any time, and him just so close is just really scary, especially when the police are trying to track him, and when he's right there. And I love that's how Mrs. Mack is hiding booze everywhere in these clever little hideouts, like a book or in the toilet thing where the water is in, and in a closet. It's so funny and clever. But she definitely is like Barb, a raging alcoholic. And I heard at one point that Steve Martin said that this comedian Steve Martin claimed that this was one of his all-time favorite movies, and that he's seen it 23 times. And when he worked with Olivia Hussey on another movie, he said it to her that, you're in one of my favorite movies, and she mistakenly thought he meant Romeo and Juliet, but then he said Black Christmas. I've seen it 23 times. This surprised her about how recognized Black Christmas has become. And now all the people working on it embrace it. Even visiting on the website by Dan Dovin, itsmebilly.com, which is probably down now because of the dying popularity, but there is still a cult following among the movie, and I'm among that cult. I love the movie. It's as good as Halloween. I see Halloween as like a spiritual successor to it, or sequel. There is another popular rumor as to how Halloween came to be, is that when John Carpenter was a film student in film school, he met Bob Clark there, and Bob Clark told Carpenter the idea of how he would go if he made a Black Christmas sequel. He said he would have the killer captured, then a year later have him escape on Halloween night and stalk more people in the sorority house, and that gave Carpenter the basis for Halloween. But it's a wild rumor that may be true or false based on how people say Halloween's executive producer Irwin Yablans came up with the idea of setting it on Halloween. But it is a very cool rumor, and it does work very well if you choose to believe it. It's a good idea. I love the rumor. It's funny how Mrs. Mack has her booze bottle inside the little toilet thing that contains the toilet water. Jeez, I would wash that, even though it was clean back then, but I wouldn't. I would still wash it under the sink water, with hot water, basically, and using alcohol as mouthwash. Worst house mother ever. And the shot here where Claire is dead on the rocking chair with the plastic sheeting still over her head is very scary. The way Bob Clark does it is very chilling when you see her like that, and drills into your head when it scares you. And even the remake did it, but it's been overused in that movie like, what, 8, 9 times? Then it becomes, by the third time it becomes boring and cliched as well. But I also like about this movie is that it's also a murder mystery. It starts with the murder of a student, and it shows our protagonist trying to solve her disappearance. It makes it much more scarier if they think she disappeared, not knowing that she's dead. Even Claire's father, Mr. Harrison, such a nice guy. I'd like to see this actor in other movies, if I find any more. But he plays the father character so well, you feel sorry for Mr. Harrison, especially when he doesn't realize that his daughter is dead. I also love the Christmas setting. It's done so well, and like the carolers and the tree and etc. It makes it much more scarier, especially how I said it earlier, that having a killing spree happening on a festive, happy holiday is very ironically horrifying. And I also love how we see a little bit of the college and what the sorority house lettering is. What's it called? Latin lettering, the Kappas, I think. To be cool. The humor in this movie, it works so well. Like the billboard on the poster on the wall in Claire's room with the old lady starting off nice and then gives us the finger at the last picture. It's just so funny. I would love to have that. And how Mrs. Mack inadvertently cursed accidentally when Mr. Harrison is nearby is hilarious. She's trying to play off as this nice person when really she's a bit of a mean person in a way. And doing it in front of a nice old gentleman makes it funnier, especially with the look on his face. Well, so to say, the other additional cast is Keira Knightley, who was in 2001: A Space Odyssey as Dave. Here he plays Olivia Hussey's character, what's her name? Jess' boyfriend, Peter Smythe. He's intended to be, spoilers, spoilers, Peter is the red herring of this movie. It drops hints that he may be the killer based on what he goes through in this movie, but he basically isn't when it's revealed at the end. But he's shown to be a bit of a unstable person. And I heard the role of Peter was originally offered to Malcolm Dowell, who would later go on to do a Clockwork Orange, Star Trek Genesis, and he played Dr. Loomis in the Rob Zombie Halloween remake. But never mind that. McDowell turned down the role for other projects, and that's when Keira Knightley came in and did the role. And John Saxon, who plays Lieutenant Fuller in this, 10 years later would go on to play the Lieutenant John in A Nightmare on Elm Street. It's cool how he plays a cop in horror movies. Mrs. Mack is a dick to her sorority, to her own sorority. I don't know. But, even so to say, there's also this one person named, I think Lieutenant Nash. He is just a funny person in the movie, how he's oblivious by the fact that when Barb gives him the fake address, saying Fellatio's 2001810, he's oblivious to the fact that he's oblivious by the meaning of what the word fellatio means, and that makes it much more hilarious. And especially when Lieutenant Fuller figures out the fake address and obliterates Fuller so sarcastically in front of the station, and he still doesn't get it what that word means. Even I didn't know until I read about it after this movie, and now that makes it, realizing what it means, it makes the joke all the more hilarious to me. Sergeant Nash, his name is. And Art Hindle, who plays Claire's boyfriend, Chris, he would later go on to play, to be in the 1978 remake Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And he is very good in this as Chris, but he's also very frightening in Body Snatchers. Hold up. That's where he plays, the boyfriend, the character named, Dr. Jeffrey Howell, which is a DDS, who plays the boyfriend of Brooke Adams' character Elizabeth Driscoll. He becomes basically the first person to be, turned by, the pod people in that movie, and he does it so well, his behavior changes into emotionless. But when Jezreel tells Peter that she's pregnant, and then tells him that she's gonna have an abortion just before he has his piano recital, I think that's a big mistake. I think because it definitely makes him off balance during his recital and makes him do the keys improperly, and you can tell by the judge's face that they're not a bit happy by how he's not doing the keys well. And it's obvious that by how he breaks the piano that he did not succeed in the recital. He failed, but they leave it opening, but I think he failed. So I think it was a big mistake that she told him about her plans before the recital. She should have told him after the recital. He worked 4 weeks practicing, and this one little revelation sets him off beat. I love this bit where Barb gives the kid alcohol right in front of Mr. Harrison. Making this argument that he's disappointment in the place more weight. The sorority girls claim that they've been having the moaner calling them for probably several days or weeks, so they've been used to it, but it makes it much more frightening that the killer would call them a couple days or weeks before he breaks into their house. Also, lucky place to find, in a way. Lucky convenience that he ends up breaking into the same place that he calls several times. In a way, so to say, the role of Miss Mack was offered to Bette Davis, who I believe turned it down. It would have been cool, but I like this woman better because of her behavior in it. I find it funny that Barb would drink alcohol, a bottle, right in the police station, in front of a cop as well. But it's just Sergeant Nash. He's like the dumb cop out of all of them. And the music was done by Carl Zitra, who is a bit of a, not much of a composer, but he did, I think, a couple of other composed a score for other movies, but I think this is his most best one because of the hauntingly eerie music score. The way he does it throughout the movie, it's very scary and spine-chilling, and I think he does a very good score in this movie. I wish there was more. I wish I could find more movies that he scored to see how he's been doing. And another interesting side note is that the role of Lieutenant Fuller was originally supposed to be played by Edmund O'Brien, another famous actor, but due to his failing health, he had to be replaced, so John Saxon was brought in at the last minute. And the role of Phil, played by Andrea Martin, was originally offered to Gilda Radner. She was attached to the role, but dropped out 1 month before filming began, owing to Saturday Night Live commitments. It was also said that the audio for the disturbing phone calls was performed by actor Nick Mancuso, who would later go on to be in to play Tom in the 1992 movie Under Siege. And the other two people who did the phone calls with Mancuso was Bob Clark and an unknown actress. Mancuso stated in an interview that he would stand on his head during the recording sessions to make his voice sound more demented. So Billy was basically played by several people, including cameraman Albert J. Played by I don't know yet. The role of Billy was played by cameraman Albert J. Burke, who created a POV camera shot for the POV shots by mounting a camera onto his back and creeping around the house. He crawled up the housing trails in the beginning of the film as well, and I think he also did the parts where we see Billy's hands. So that was a cameraman playing Billy during the POV shots. Everyone, Albert J. Dunk, or Burt Dunk, according to the end credits of this movie. And on Peter's piano recital, you can tell he's doing the keys a bit frustratingly, and he's sweating, so he's failing the recital. And this movie did not, upon its release on October 11th, 1974 in Canada, it did not do, and especially worldwide, it did not do very well because of the graphic scenes and the violence and the holiday setting. But upon the passing of the time, it began to form a cult following amongst it, and now everyone loves it. And I think it's really cool that it's getting the cult following that it deserves. I think it deserves more. Thus proving that critics back then didn't know what they were saying, like The Thing and The Hitcher. It even has on the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 63% fresh score based on 24 reviews with an average rating of 6.2 out of 10. But some people weren't very enthusiastic back then. It had even garnered mixed reviews. A writer for the New York Times scored the film 1 out of 5, calling it a whodunit that begs the question of why it was made. But glad to know that some people have softened up to it. It even, at the Academy of Science Fiction Fantasy Horror Films in 1976, it was nominated for Best Horror Film. And by the Edgar Allan Poe Awards in 1976, it was nominated for Best Motion Picture. And at the Canadian Film Awards in 1975, it won for Best Sound Editing in a Feature. The film even ranked number 87 on Bravo's The 100 Scariest Movie Moments. And even though the movie ends ambiguously and shocking, it never had a sequel, and I think that's good that it doesn't have one, because it makes the end all the more scarier. Because the sequel would basically ruin the first film's ending, like Halloween 2. I also love Barb's funny, drunk belief on, I think it's snails or fish underwater mating. It's so funny how she says it, especially in front of Mr. Harrison, while Mrs. Mack and Phil are having a hard time not laughing. But there also is a nice bit where she basically rants them out for how she believes they blame her for driving Claire away. So I think that's why she's drunk to what's it called? Drink the sorrows down. Even though this movie had a couple of good DVD releases, I believe this deserves a DVD or Blu-ray release by an underground home video company called the Criterion Collection. Or by the Scare Factory. Either of those two, doesn't matter either way, but it would be cool if it was released by either one of them. They would do the movie do the movie, what's it called? Justifully? They would justify the movie, they would make the movie. They would do judgment to the movie very well, and they would make the movie better and release very good other good special features and put every special feature on various from various other releases, including Bob Clark's audio commentary, into their release. And I think that would be cool if it was done by either Criterion or Shout Factory. I hope so in the near future. Because it is a very important horror film that preceded Halloween and jump-started the slasher film, and it has a very good recognition. I believe it deserves it by Criterion or Shout Factory, and it'll gain wider recognition as a result of those releases by those two companies, by either one of them. Here's where Mrs. Mack, as everyone is going out to do the search party, Mrs. Mack stays behind, getting ready to leave, so she tells Phil that, I probably won't be back by the time you get back here, but won't be here by the time you get back here. So that makes her whereabouts, when she gets killed, they don't have to worry about where Mrs. Mack is as well. Not realizing that she's in the attic dead and not in Florida, on a plane to Florida. I wish it delved more into the search party. It would make it much more cooler for the movie. Maybe in another horror movie, or if I write my own, have us delve into a subplot about a search party, and show people doing the search with cops as well. But the one shot coming up where we see the front of the sorority house and the silhouette of a man, either Billy or Peter, walking up towards the front of the house, stopping by the sidewalk and sitting down with the Carl Zitrer's ominous score, is very psychologically spine-chilling and, like I said, ominous. It's just really scary. And you don't know who this guy is, either Billy or Peter, even though there is an autographed photo based on this, and it had Peter autographed in it, so, but you never know. Since this movie is dropping hints that Peter might be the killer, but there are subtle hints that reveal that he isn't, like when Claire is killed by the killer, a couple minutes later, Peter calls from the recital on the other side of the college, so that proves his innocence. And at the end, when the killer chases Jess and she locks herself in the basement, the killer, you can hear, open the front door and close it. He may have walked out, but I think he faked it. I think he was still inside waiting for Jess to come out of the basement so he could attack her, and Peter was just outside searching through the house, hearing the screams. But it makes it very effective that it may be him. Even the subtle very good obvious hand drop, like when Jess gets another phone call in the middle of the movie, and a couple minutes later Peter walks out from upstairs. It makes you think it's him, but he says he's sleeping, but how can he not hear this guy making the obscene loud phone calls from the other room so close to him? I don't know. But this lead up to where Mrs. Mack walks up to the attic and is killed is very scary as well, being lured to her doom as well. But I also love how the killer uses perfect weapon to use to kill Mrs. Mack, which is a swinging grappling hook, which luckily hits her by her chin here and pulls her up, and it kills her. Even Carl Cicher's piece of score here that is very good as well. And very clever ways of hiding the killer's face. I think it works very well. I also like it because the killer's not wearing a typical mask. His face is shown exposed to the outside world, but we don't see it. So I think that's really cool. It was Halloween that spawned the slasher film cliche that the killer must wear a mask. But this movie helped prove that you can hide the killer without having him wear a mask. Just use clever ways to hide his face through, like the wall or out of frame or behind a door or in the shadows. I like to see more horror movies done that way. Here's where the cab driver, after Mrs. Mack gets killed, the cab driver is by the door wondering if anyone was there, and he walks away. The killer shouts out, rants about in the attic when the cab driver leaves. He's angry by the fact that the cab driver didn't come in. The killer wanted to lure the cab driver to his doom as well, but luckily the cab driver walked away, dodged a bullet. He's angry by the fact that no one is coming out for a ride in this cab. But also the killer doing the psychotic rant, messing up the attic makes him more scarier, especially when he's screaming like a Frankenstein. Makes him that belief that he's psychologically unstable much more scarier if your killer has no motive. I think giving the killer no motive makes him more scarier, and if you do it including him making him mentally unstable, it makes him that much more frightening. Especially like Michael, he's said to be pure and simple evil. That was it. That made him more scarier. But then Halloween 6 had to ruin it. Imagine if they did a sequel and they had to reveal who Billy is and why he's doing it. That would just give away the mystery, ruin it. But the part here where the search party finds the missing 6-year-old or 13-year-old girl named Janice, they find her dead, and what sounds like a what's it called? That snow-blowing motor sled thing. What happened? Was she killed by the snow driver thing? I don't know. We are never shown, but based on the people's reaction, it must be very graphic. Horrifying. And so to say, I'm trying to count how many phone calls there are in this movie. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 phone calls by the killer. 5 or 6. And it gives you enough backstory to who Billy is. Basically, I think in my belief, and also others, that when Billy was possibly in his teen years, he had a baby sister named Agnes, and for some reason he killed her horrifyingly and hid her corpse away, and the parents, based on the phone calls, were torturing Billy as to where Agnes is, and he must be the reason behind his apeshit screaming that he was tortured. And I guess he was locked up in a mental institution, and when he was released at the age of 8, I like to believe also that he was released at the age of 18, and by that time he was released, his parents were already dead from something, and he was still unstable. The doctors believed he probably was stable enough to return to society, but he wasn't, and he was walking around and taunting the sorority house he must have found and eventually break in. That's what I believe. But basically everything you need to know about Billy is through the phone calls. This movie is like When a Stranger Calls, but with the Christmas and sorority house elements in it. And it looks like the killer and Peter are wearing the same sweater, but if you look at it color-wise, they're not the same. Peter's is green, and the killer's maybe dark brown, I think. So that tells that Peter's not the killer. And it looks like Peter's wearing brown jeans, and the killer was wearing blue jeans. So those are clues that Peter's not the killer again. In my belief, since the rest of the movie is set in one day and night, that it may be set on Christmas Eve. I heard somewhere that when he was screening the movies for studios, when Bob Clark was doing the private screening to the heads of the studio, they asked if he could add in an additional ending where that is different from what we now have, where Chris is sitting in the room with the unconscious sleeping Jess, and when she wakes up, Chris reveals himself to be the killer, saying, "Agnes, don't tell what we did," and before killing her, thus revealing that Chris is the killer. But Bob Clark was against that, feeling that it should end ambiguously, and based on the ending here, he succeeded, and I think it works this way. So it frustrates some of us, but when you soften up to it, it works perfectly. Kind of like the ending to John Carpenter's The Thing, or the end of Halloween without the sequels. During principal photography, Keir Dullea worked on the film for only a week, never meeting Margot Kidder and barely meeting John Saxon, based on the one shot where Peter and Lieutenant Fuller pass by each other without just only staring at each other, looking at each other for a glimpse, and Fuller begins to suspect that maybe Peter who's the killer, and but the film is edited in such a way that he appears to be present throughout the movie. That's how good editing works. Also, during an interview with Bob Clark, Clark said Olivia Hussey's decision to take the role of Jess was based upon advice given to her by a psychic. According to Clark, Hussey said her psychic believed that the film would be successful and a wise career choice for her. She took the role. Isn't that cool? Deciding to take a role for a movie based on the word of a psychic. Even though it's set in the winter and Christmas, the snow scene outside of the house was actually fake, because there had been surprisingly little snowfall during the filming. A foam material that was provided by the local fire department was used for snow on the lawn, and according to Albert J. Dunk, the substance actually caused the grass on the lawn to grow greener than ever the following spring. Art Hindle, he said that he revealed in an interview that the fur coat he wore in his movie was actually his own. It still hangs in his closet to this day. Discount Mail, Cruella de Vil. And here's where Nash is told about the fake address, Fellatio 20810, I think. And he still doesn't get what it means, even when he's sarcastically insulted about it. He does say something dirty, ain't it? So, we'll give him a point for that. Bing! He still doesn't get it, but we'll give him a point for saying something dirty. Nash almost looks like what's his name? Discount Don Knotts. I swear to God, it looked like him when I first saw this. Don Knotts? But this, what Peter says to Jess here about aborting the abortion, you're gonna be very sorry. That's a threat, and it just makes him more susceptible to being a killer. What makes this movie more ironic is the fact that Bob Clark directed this in '74, and 9 years later he would go on to direct the classic Christmas comedy, A Christmas Story, which is much more of his most famous work, and it just makes it much more ironic that he made two Christmas movies, one which is a horror movie and the other a comedy. Because Bob Clark did start off his career as a horror movie director, then he shifted on to doing comedies, such as also Porky's and Baby Geniuses. But, so to say, the line, the calls are coming from inside the house, this movie is the first movie to use that concept, before the 1979 When a Stranger Calls, Halloween, and the When a Stranger Calls remake. But this is the first movie to use that concept in a horror movie, and it works very well. Even though you know that he's inside it, but it makes the shock all the more scary. The revelation all the more shocking. But, you do like Lieutenant Fuller because he's the only cop who believes the girls, and he's the one who sympathizes with him, so that makes him likable to the audience, unlike the other cops in the movie. Even like Donald Pleasance in Halloween, you side with him because he knows the killer very well, a lot better than Sheriff Brackett, who doesn't believe Loomis. But I do like Lieutenant Fuller. He's such a sympathetic character in the movie. Even though he tries his best to investigate and capture the killer, he doesn't succeed, but he's still a great hero for the movie. And also, along with the idea of when the girl realized that the calls are coming from the house, she walks up into the upstairs, armed with a fire poker. That's also another idea I think that was first used in this movie, and later movies would go on to use that weapon, fire poker, as a weapon. But it is a bit dumb to after realizing that the killer is upstairs, to go up to the upstairs. If it was a guy, a big football guy, then that would be otherwise. But not a girl. I might try that in one of those scary movies I write. Have a football guy, an ex-football player, investigate upstairs. But instead of fire poker, he uses fists. Or something like that. Now what's Peter doing hiding behind a tree, looking at the sorority house, while there's a cop car guarding the house outside, thus making him more suspectable. But the scene coming up where Barb gets killed by the killer, where the killer used the glass unicorn as his weapon to stab Barb to death. The idea of how Jess is downstairs by the front door listening to the characters. Barb's screams is drowned out by the carolers caroling. Makes it very psychologically terrifying to the audience, including me, that the carolers are inadvertently drowning out the screams from upstairs. And it works very well. I wish more movies would do that. Even Halloween did it much differently, but where Linda is on the phone with Laurie and she ends up getting killed by Michael, and Laurie thinks it's Annie doing her noise jokes, but they both work very well. But even though, even though it's never rumored in a way, but it's believed that Black Christmas unintentionally inspired a series of murders that serial killer Ted Bundy did. around January 14th through 15th of 78, where he killed the members of a sorority house in probably within an hour or 5 minutes. But that's what many people believe based on what I heard in a website. I don't believe it, but it's scary how people would believe that a movie would unintentionally inspire an event. A fun trivia note that when Jess is talking to Lieutenant Fuller on the phone and Phil is right by her in the room next to the fireplace, if you look behind them in the background in the wall, you can see a shadow of the killer right there. I never noticed it until my mama showed it, pointed it out to me, and I didn't know it, but it's so scary how it happens. Just like how in Halloween, the background, you see Michael, even though that one was more obvious, but not this one to me until my mama pointed it out. Thought it'd be good for y'all to know that, in case y'all didn't notice. And, the cop car, the one cop outside, guarding the house, we never know exactly when, but he gets killed by the killer with his throat slashed, but it's done so well when you suspect that Peter is the killer that he may have, after hiding out behind a tree, he killed the guy and broke into the house. But it's possible that the killer killed the cop after the carolers left. That's what I believe. And it's funny how he's right there by the door, and yet Barb doesn't notice him when she sees the front door behind Jess, in a way. And anyway, to conclude everything, I'd like to I'm just going to wrap up this review to say that I do love this movie. It's very good, and it is a very good movie, and I prefer that I advise you to get this edition over the others, because it has the most features, the picture quality is good, the audio, and the cover is very scary as well. If this film doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight. That's scary. But anyway, the movie is very good. I love it, along with Halloween. They're very good to get if you watch them back to back. And it's a very psychologically effective movie, and it definitely has the same tone as Halloween, so this is like the prototype for it. And so I give it like 10 stars out of 10 in my opinion. And thank you very much for watching this small review of me talking about Black Christmas, and I hope you enjoyed the review, and soon there will be more other movie reviews, possibly van commentaries coming up soon, and thank you very much, and bye bye, peace.